B2C show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Let's start from the beginning. Why don't you just go ahead and, introduce, say, who you coach, what you coach on?
I call myself a stewardship coach. I basically focus on small business owners. I do some personal coaching as well, but a lot of them are either business owners or have a side hustle or something else that they want to be. So they're still kind of in that entrepreneurial sphere. And I work with them on mastering their time, their talent, and their treasures so that they can live out and do what it is that they really want to do. I call that living out their calling. So those areas I found cover where a lot of folks struggle when it comes to, getting set up in business, getting started. The most common complaints I hear is either I don't have enough money or I don't have enough time. And so getting those areas straight tends to let us actually go out and do the things that we need to do.
All right. Well, now, and I do have a little bit of background information. So let's, try time travel. I know you had a corporate career,
Yep.
and then at some point, what happened? How did you happen to come into being a coach?
Yeah. So first off, I'll go back even a little further. So I was actually a school teacher first. That was my first career. I did that for 16 years. I was a science teacher. And real quickly, I took an approach to teaching that was different than a lot of folks did, where instead of just standing at the front of the room and kind of, read the chapter, do the questions at the back of the chapter, in part because I was teaching science, I engaged the students in a lot more activities and did a lot more inquiry and kind of questioning and doing what they would call the Socratic teaching method, where you ask questions. And looking back on that, I realized that I was actually kind of teaching using a coaching methodology. I wouldn't have said it at the time, but that's what it was. And then as I moved forward, I moved, like you said, into the corporate world. So I went from teaching to testing. And the names of my students, I joined the dark side. I went to writing tests for a living, worked myself up into an executive position there, middle management kind of thing, had a big team of people, lots of clients, big budget, all of that sort of stuff, on planes, flying around the country. And again, I was in a position where part of my job was to bring up other leaders in the company and kind of train and develop them. And as I did that, again, I took this kind of coaching approach to working with the staff that reported to me, as opposed to a very directive kind of approach. So it was a little different than what a lot of folks in the company were doing. And I had a pretty good success with it. And again, looking back on that, I realized what I was doing is using those same coaching skills and developing those coaching skills. So my joke is, even though I haven't been a coach during those two careers, I was coaching during those two careers. So towards the middle of it, my wife and I actually went through a period where we had a severe financial strain ourselves that actually started while I was still teaching. I was suicidal because of finances. We almost got divorced. There was a lot of stress and strain, and we kind of changed what we were doing. And as we did that, I was also in the midst of changing careers. All of this is going on at the same time. And folks just noticed that we were doing and acting and doing things that were different. And so people get curious and start saying, hey, what are you doing? And then we tell them, and then they're like, well, can you help me? So I started helping people on the side while I was doing all of this other stuff. And again, using those coaching kind of skills just naturally. And as I realized what I was doing, that's what I decided, okay, I need to get some more training. I need to learn more about this. I need to dive deeper into it, because this could probably turn into something that's more of a business. And I really love, when I was teaching, that was the part of teaching that I loved the most. When I was working in corporate, that was the part of corporate that I loved the most. Hey, if I go do this coaching stuff, I'll get to do even more of the stuff that I love the most. There's still a lot of stuff I do around my business that isn't stuff I love, but there's more that I do that really engages and gives me energy. So I began doing that on the side in 2011. By 2017, I'd actually quit, dream job, what everyone would tell you is a dream job, so that I could do my own business and do this full time. So I've been coaching full time since 2017. Set it up for the very beginning to be a virtual business and work with people all over the world. So I've been blessed to continue to do that. And that is sort of the evolution. We started with financial. Later, I started noticing people were asking about time, and some of the same sorts of techniques and skills and frameworks worked there. So I began to work in that area. And again, it evolved eventually to what I call the stewardship coaching and working on time, talent, and treasures.
Right, right. Okay, so picking up from your story, so you started doing that, you said around 2011, and then
Uh-huh.
quit your corporate job 2017. So it's like,
6
6
years.
years plus or minus. Yeah. Now, I want to ask, like, how did you get, because I assume your first people who you were helping, you probably didn't take money from them, right? Like the very
The very
first
first
people.
person we helped actually wrote us a check for $135. That was my
Okay.
very
Well,
first. That
okay.
was my very first quote coaching client, and it was really the first people that my wife and I sat down and formally helped. We were teaching some classes and doing some other things where we were volunteers and coordinating. We weren't really
Right.
the content expert. So that part we were doing free, but that wasn't really coaching. That was facilitating a
Okay.
class. But out of that class, somebody said, "Hey, would you sit down with us and help us one on one?" And we said yes. And we didn't actually ask for money. And at the end of it, after we'd worked with them about, I don't remember, it was probably a month, maybe a month and a half. At the end of it, they're like, "Thank you so much," and wrote a check and handed it to us. And we're kind of like,
Okay.
"Oh wow, we could get paid for this."
Okay. Well, that's unusual
That is a
story.
weird situation. I know.
Exactly.
My
But
second
okay,
client
the
was where I
next
had to
one.
work really hard.
There you go. There we go. Let's think about the typical kind of first client. How was it then? How difficult was it? Because from my experience, I see it's a
Yeah.
big stumbling block from going out and practicing your coaching craft, or going out and helping people, to actually asking to get paid for what you do.
Yeah, and there's two hurdles right there, because that's part of it. I think there's the first hurdle is actually getting someone to say yes, they want coaching, and then the second hurdle is actually getting them to say, "And I'll pay you."
Yes.
And I've literally seen coaches struggle with both of those. I struggled with both of those. And the first one, what I started with was literally just talking to people that I already knew. People that already knew, like, and trust me, and I didn't go in and say, "Hey, you know." Bob, you're probably struggling with money, right? You need my help. I went in and I said, "Hey, Bob, I'm really excited about this. I'm doing this on the side. This is something I really like doing. And let me tell you a little bit about it. Do you know anyone who might benefit from that?"
Yeah.
And the interesting thing was sometimes Bob went, "Yeah, me," and
Yeah.
it's like, great. Other times Bob said, "Well, no, I don't really know anyone." Okay, well, at least I practiced telling Bob about, who I want to
Yeah.
help and how I want to help him. And then the third answer was Bob sometimes would say, like, "Oh, you know what? My daughter was talking about this the other day. She could really needed, she could help get some help in
Yeah.
this." And then it was like, "Oh, great. Here's what I'd like you to do. Go talk to your daughter, get her permission, and then make an introduction between us, and then I'll handle it from there." And so, I always tried to own the follow-up. So rather than just handing Bob my card and say, "Give this to your daughter," because I learned pretty
Yeah.
quickly. I mean,
That doesn't
again, I was
happen.
on the other end of that where people would hand me business cards at networking meetings, and it's like trash,
Yeah.
trash, trash. So I'm like, that's not going to work. So I tried something different. And, I still use that today, where it's like, "Okay, can you make an introduction? Here's how to make an introduction." And, sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't, but enough times they did that out of the people that either self-identified or those folks, I got a few more clients. And it was just kind of my
Right.
circle, the people that I already knew, that already know, like, and trusted
Yeah.
me. And then, of course, the second half of that, actually asking someone to pay you, and how much do they pay you, and all of that. And I think that for a lot of coaches is even the bigger struggle, because it's like, here I am, I'm coaching people around money, and so the immediate thought is, well, if they're struggling with money, they're not going to want to pay me.
Yeah.
They're already hurting for money. And getting over that mindset of, wait a minute, I'm actually providing a service, it has value, and they'll be, we'll be able to provide more value than they pay me, so I could ask for money. And so I started just asking for very little money. I started asking, for session by session, pay me for a session. I don't do that anymore.
Which
But
hopefully you don't do anymore.
I don't do that anymore, and I don't recommend it. Even for starting out, I don't recommend it. But that's where I started because I didn't know any better. Remember at that point too, I was just kind of doing it on the side. I hadn't really started
Right.
learning about coaching or learning about the business of coaching, which again, you got to know both of those to be a professional coach, I think.
Right. Okay. No, and I think it makes sense. Again, I think there is a blessing and there is the opposite of it, that today there is so much information about marketing and business of coaching, but the blessing is that you can easily Google it, find it, and have access to it even for free. However, a lot of this information is misleading. So for example, a lot of marketers or business gurus, business coaches tell you need to charge premium prices. Right. I think that just doesn't work.
But you don't have to.
First, but second, when you're just starting out, yes, you have probably some corporate knowledge. Yes, you have some experience, but it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be hard to start with charging premium prices. And I think much easiest way is to work your way up.
Work your way up. Yeah. What I've always done is I've used my calendar is full method, which basically means I had a certain amount of time on my calendar. It was available for clients. I was charging a price that I could get out. Part of it, I always say, almost start with the price that you can get out without choking. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the call, there's a big difference between, well, Lidia, I was thinking about maybe, if you could, maybe you'd pay me. Oh, I don't know. So, that kind of thing, because you're stumbling over your words because you're in your head, you're going, there's no way they're going to pay this. So you're thinking that and going, hey, Lidia, for this coaching package, I charge $997 or, $750 or $25, kind of what's the number that you can get out without choking? And then I always tell people, now add a little bit to that, push yourself a little outside of your comfort zone, but not too far. And kind of, and then like you said, once your calendar starts getting full, well, that's a sign from the market that, hey, it's time to raise your prices. You're getting, enough traction that it makes sense to kind of begin to incrementally increase your prices.
No, absolutely. And again, my point is when you're starting out, you want to get as many clients as you can, right? Because you need that experience, you need this feedback, you need these testimonials, right? So you can staying with the high prices and no clients is much worse than having lots of clients with not so high prices that you can always build up. It's kind of difficult to go down, right? Kind of explaining why you're doing that. Going up is always, you have this valid reasons, like I'm getting experience. That's why my prices are rising. My calendar is full. I'm limiting the number of clients that I'm getting. So it's kind of all logical. You can explain it to yourself. You can explain it to your clients. And it's it's very natural. And it's so much better when you have a bunch of clients. And it's a way better problem having a lot of clients, paying you not enough than having no clients with such high prices.
Absolutely. I have seen coaches outprice themselves, and the other things that you want to think about when you're pricing, beyond just your own experience level or where you are in kind of the coaching curve, who is your ideal client? What else is in the, what else is out there? Not saying you want to price the same way everyone else does, because that doesn't always make sense, but you still want to know what's out there, and not even just for coaching, but for, things that are associated to coaching. Because if you're coming in with something that's just completely foreign to anything else that person's heard, well, then you might want to set that up and talk about that a little differently. Not saying you can't do it, but you're going to have to set it up in a different way than if it's kind of more, oh yeah, this is in the realm of what I would have expected. But again, that's something that you usually don't know going in with your very first, even 5 clients, 15 clients. It's, somewhere in there you start learning it, but a lot of times you don't know it with your first client. So it's better to underprice that a little bit and work up. And you can even tell them, this is my discounted prices because you're one of my test clients, you're one of my beta clients. I'm testing out some of my processes. There's a reason I'm giving you less, I'm expecting a testimonial at the end. If I want you to be honest, but this is part of what you're giving me instead of money. And people get that, they understand that.
Yeah. And that's where I see, again, at least I don't hear a lot of business coaches, marketers tell to go with this exact strategy, whereas I fully support it, where you actually go full transparency, fully open that you're just starting out. First of all, it will be very hard to hide it, right? But secondly, I think seeing it as advantage or presenting it as advantage to your client that you're going to invest, you're very interested in getting them to the result. This is one of the beginner advantage. Secondly, the discounted price could be also an advantage, but there could be other advantages instead of kind of trying to show up as an expert or as someone that you're just not. I don't know. It's never worked for me.
Fake it till you make it is not really the way to go when it comes to coaching.
Exactly. It never worked for me. I never recommend it to my clients. I just don't understand how people can actually win with that strategy.
Yeah. The other thing I see out there that creates a lot of noise, I think, for coaches in the marketplace, when you're talking about they go Google it. And by the way, everything that we're talking about right now, there's an analogy to what you do as a coach too, because most of what we do in coaching, people can Google and get a lot of information. Yeah. So it's not information that we're providing as a coach. Not yes, sometimes you're providing information, but that's not really the point, because they can Google information. It's the actual, making sure it's quality information. It's the accountability, it's the follow through, it's all those things that's the value. But what I started to say is the noise that I see too is a lot of the folks that are out there, quote, teaching coaches how to be coaches. There's kind of two different lanes that I see. One is they've actually never had a coaching business, but maybe they have a content marketing business, or they have, something else. And now they're trying to take those same things and say, hey, as a coach, this will work for you. And I'm not saying it won't work, but it's not often the best way or the easiest way to do it, because you're really having to set up a second business to create your coaching business. And it's a lot of work and a lot of noise and a lot of distraction. And, I see a lot of people burn out before they get to a place where it does work. Again, not saying it can't ever work, because I know a handful of coaches that have done it that way and made it work, but I know a lot more that started that way and then burned out and quit. The other is you have somebody that they have done a coaching business, and now what they want to teach you is, here is exactly how I set up my coaching business. Go do exactly what I did and it'll work perfectly for you. And the problem with that is, maybe, do you have the same skill set? Do you have the same things that is it the same clientele? Is it, what resources do you have available? There's just a lot of variables that this is where working with somebody who has some, a coach kind of person that can actually sit down with you and go, okay, for you, maybe we want to massage that a little bit. Or even, you just want to set up a business that's different for some reason. They've set up this massive hire employees and have multiple coaches, and that's what they want to teach you to do. And you're like, I don't really want employees. I just kind of, that's not what I want. So there's a lot of, it's kind of two extremes, where one is people that are teaching people to do it, but have never actually done it. And the other is people teaching to do it, but they're teaching you to do the one thing that they've done, as opposed to working with you a little bit on, hey, what is it that you want to do? What are you trying to achieve? And there still may be steps or an order or a process, but there's still some flexibility and some some tweakiness that goes on. There's a great word. Some tweaking that goes on with the process that you use for your particular situation or goals.
No, 100%. I think this is one of the disadvantages of kind of having a fixed program or online course or whatever
Right.
it is that is just totally fixed. That I don't think there is recipe for everyone. I think there is none. So some of people might take it with a little bit of tweaking, but some may need completely
We
different
need
things. So there
completely
is a
different.
there you go. So there is a danger in that, I think, and that actually goes into my kind of next question about the business, the building business kind of area or question. I think it's better maybe to learn some principles and maybe to learn some tools and techniques, and then put it all together, which could be difficult. If someone don't have any marketing knowledge, business knowledge,
Mhm.
that's where like a business coach would be really helpful. So, when you were starting out, how did you feel? Did you have any knowledge, background knowledge, skills on kind of marketing and promotion and business
Yeah.
building? And how did you fill those gaps then?
So I had knowledge around small business because my father was a small business owner. I grew up in that. I started my first business when I was 12 years old. It just kind of a lawn care business, or actually the first one was a painting business, and then I started a lawn care business later. And I do mean I started a business because it wasn't just me doing the painting. I was finding jobs, doing bids, pricing, and then hiring basically the kids that I went to school with to actually do some of the labor. So I was running a true business. It was just, a small business in my hometown. So I did that even as a high school student. So I always had, an entrepreneurial spirit. I always had some knowledge around what it means to run a business and, the
Right.
kind of the concept of income and outgo. And then in the corporate world, because I was dealing with finances and budget and staffing and all of that, I definitely had knowledge in that area. For me, my biggest weaknesses was kind of the marketing and how to do that. I never really had to do that in, any of my side businesses because they were real small side businesses and I hadn't really had to do that as a teacher. And the customer shows up whether they want to or not. And I really didn't have to do that in the corporate world because that was handled by other parts of the company. um, so I wasn't really the one doing it. So I had definitely, I would say, some knowledge around business, and none of that was specific to coaching, but it's still, there was some knowledge, but not that much around the area of marketing for sure.
Okay. So I guess my next question, like, how did you fill up those gaps? How did you, eventually become a successful, grow a successful coaching business?
So three different things. So one is, I did do I read, I Googled, I studied, I availed myself of information. That's one.
Right.
There's books on the shelf back there
And
that are
tried it
about
out.
marketing,
And
and that
and tried it
experimented with
out.
that exactly and did that. So there's definitely that lane, and that's valuable. I also went to and got plugged in with a group of other coaches that had success and began to, learn from other people that were coaches. So I started reaching out to other coaches, finding coaches that had an abundance mindset that were like, "Oh yeah, I'll tell you what I'm doing." And, again, not with the idea of I'm going to copy everything that they're doing, but with the idea of, what are they doing that's working and what from that can I extrapolate, as kind of best practices. And then the third lane, and this actually we've actually already mentioned it, but I'll say the third lane is just plain old experimentation. Going in, doing something, committing to something for 3 months, 6 months, a year, whatever it was, and then getting feedback, getting results, judging how much I liked it. How is this easy for me? Is this fun for me? Is this, in my skill set? Judging what kind of results am I getting, judging all of these sorts of factors and looking at how it worked. And then, okay, now am I going to continue with this, or am I going to, kill? And as I found things that worked, I would put, 80 to 90% of my effort into those things that were working, and then continue to experiment over here with that 10 or 20%. So I'm always trying
Right.
something new, but on a small scale, even today.
Right.
Even now that I have things that are working well, it's like I still don't want to put all my eggs in that basket, because that could change in 3 months. So
Absolutely.
and you never know. So one of those experiments might turn out to work even better. It's like, oh, that's
Right.
now my 90%. Let me move it over, kind of thing. So that idea of just put it into practice, get feedback, pay attention to it. Because I see a lot of folks that do marketing, but don't actually ever try to measure whether they're getting results. And it's like,
Okay.
well, why? You've got to look at, what am I doing, and is it working for me, and is it working in terms of my business goals, before you continue it.
Yeah, no, knowing your numbers and looking at the right numbers, I think these are kind of the two laws that I try to follow because it's so easy to get distracted by the either the new shiny object syndrome,
Right.
new network, new something, and I'm very excited person, so I get attracted to new things. But unless you follow your strategy through the numbers, if this is working, okay, like this 80-20 rule, right? Okay, you can dedicate 20% of your time to try new
Go,
things
go
just to
play with the new toy.
satisfy, but you need to stick to your numbers. And then secondly, looking at the right numbers, right?
Hmm.
Because there are so many numbers, and some of them just not the numbers that gonna bring you results.
Right.
Ultimately, clients, ultimately revenues, return in clients. I mean, that's another kind of part of the equation.
Hmm.
And just and that's a little bit side question, but on the same topic, do you think? Just curious to know your opinion. I do have mine. Do you think coaches can outsource marketing?
I think it's doable. I think it's harder than a lot of coaches think. So it is something that I'm not going to say it's impossible, because the minute you do that, there's going to be the one exception to that rule that proves it wrong. But I think a lot of what we get sold as coaches is marketing, is really lead gen, which is a type of marketing or a part
Just
of
part.
marketing, but it's not all of marketing.
Yeah.
And it often ends up, if all you're getting is leads that aren't really, qualified leads, they aren't really the people that are interested in your business. Again, you can get swamped. You can actually get, killed by getting too much of the lead that isn't the right lead. And so I think a lot of times the marketing that coaches outsource, it's not that they can't outsource it as much as it is what they're outsourcing to isn't really the right kind of marketing for what they're trying to do. So much of coaching is a relationship business, in terms of, that it is a human being talking to a human being, and that's part of the value of it. And then if you kind of remove yourself from the marketing, it's kind of hard to do it now. You're back to that more of a content marketing model than a coaching marketing model. So I'm not going to say it's impossible, but I would say it's probably done poorly a lot more than it's done well.
Yeah, yeah. My opinion is I haven't seen a successful case. So
Yeah.
maybe they are, but what I've seen didn't work very
Right.
well.
I haven't seen
Again,
a successful case either, but I'm not going to tell you that there, somebody in the comments is going to go, here's the one exception to that. So that's why I'm never going to say never.
yeah, yeah, and I've seen a lot of even small business owners who are not coaches actually say they outsource so many other things and they keep
Keep
content
marketing.
creation, marketing, messaging, copywriting, they keep to themselves, right? So they keep doing it themselves, being
Hmm.
on social, because I guess it's really hard, that someone
Hmm.
writes in your tone of voice, uh, you know, uh, um, I
Well, there's
know we're not going
also,
to get into AI that is trying to do that for us. For now, I'm not convinced that you can. I haven't seen the successful
right.
case, and I think And I tell you where this question is coming from. I have met clients, my clients, coaches, who said, I hate marketing, I hate social media, I hate content creation, I don't have ideas, I don't want to be in front of the camera, I want to coach, like just bring me clients.
Mhm.
That doesn't work.
Mhm. So, I'll give you an example of a place where it is working. It is working to some extent because I just thought of one. And it's literally in something that I'm part of. So, the coaching group that I'm part of that I mentioned earlier, Coach Connections, we have an arm that does marketing out to find clients, and those clients come in and they actually go through a process where we identify a coach from the group that's a good fit for them. We call it Coach Match, and we match them with a coach. And
Right.
90% of the time, 95% of the time, that match, they meet with the coach, they get started working, everything is great. But again, it's a very intensive, and manual. I mean, when we say meet with the, I'm like literally one of the people that's the experienced people meets with the client and does a diagnosis and an
Right.
assessment to figure out, oh, you probably need Bob, or you need Susie, or you need, and does an introduction and a match. So it's not your typical matching kind of
And
situation.
people who do marketing, they are coaches, or they know very
Mhm.
well what coaching is, what
Oh
coaching
yeah, and his coach is
coaches
doing it
are.
exactly.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah,
That's my point. That's my point. You need a coaching mindset. You
yeah.
need to very well understand what it is. And again, I'm not saying it's impossible, but what I'm thinking that to get that type of marketer who will know that well, it's probably going to cost you a lot, and I'm not sure if it's going to be compensated, in at least in the beginning.
And the other piece is, even if you're doing, even if somebody else is doing producing material for you, or helping you in some way, or doing part of your marketing, or even doing all of it, I think a lot of times too, the thing we forget is that there's a piece of marketing which is just putting you out as a human being, and posting sometimes about your dog, or your, I'm going to post a picture today. We have chickens and they haven't been laying eggs, and we finally got 2 eggs, and so there's I did a silly picture of me holding an egg up, going, "Yay!" They finally paid rent. I'm going to post that too as part of my business stuff with a little caption,
Right.
idea. So it's letting people see that there's a human being behind this thing, I think is valuable. And I think sometimes we forget the human side of it. And again, when you outsource it, it's harder to outsource the human side of it. Unless someone's following you around, they're not going to post a picture of your kid doing something clever. That would be a
Absolutely.
little creepy. So I
Absolutely.
follow that.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. All right. I want to talk about two ways to promote yourself, get clients as a coach that I think you know about. Well, first one you introduced me to is being a guest on people's podcast. I know you use it extensively. Just tell us how you got into it, and do you feel like
Sure.
it's a good strategy for people for coaches who just starting out?
Yeah, actually, I think it could be. You, so I started it. Basically, I started my own podcast back in 2018, and I still have my own podcast. It's out there. You can find it. It's called Inspired Stewardship. And what I did, the reason I did that was because I really don't like to write, but I don't mind talking. Set a microphone in front of my face, hand it to me. I've always been fine, whatever. I started talking publicly when I was like 12 years old. So it's always been something
Cool.
that I've done and I've been attracted to. So podcasts made a lot of sense, where writing a blog or that kind of stuff at that time didn't, because that was a lot of work. And so I did that, and it was partly for marketing, and it was also partly just to be able to process my own ideas, and then it was also to make connections. So I've written a book. Everybody connected with that book, from the people that helped me write it, to who introduced me to the publisher, to who wrote the foreword, to who I interviewed. Everybody involved in that book I met through the podcast. So that was kind of me doing my own podcast. As part of that, I realized two things. One, people were coming to me as clients through the podcast. Well, that meant some people that listen to podcasts might become coaching clients, And then the second thing was, if I want to get more people listening to my podcast, I probably want to talk to people that are already listening to podcasts because they're the most likely to listen to another podcast. Most people that listen to podcasts don't listen to one. They listen to 25,
True.
or 30 or 80
Is
or
the
whatever it is.
preferred, is
Yeah,
the preferred
it's their
medium. Yeah.
modality. So those two things together meant, hey, if I can get in front of other audiences of podcast people, I could potentially grow my podcast and I could potentially find some clients. So it's two birds, one stone. Out of that, I started reaching out and trying to do guesting. And I will tell you, when I first started, it was incredibly hard. Since then, there's been tools and services that have made that a lot easier. But when I started out, it was literally just looking for podcasts on iTunes, finding podcasts, and thinking about, hey, is this podcast one where either it's related to the kind of people that would probably like my podcast, or is it related to the kind of people that are those business owners, those folks that are struggling in these areas, or best, both, And if it is, okay, that's a great one to reach out to and try to get on that show. And so it wasn't just go on every show under the sun, but it was also being a lot broader than I think people do a lot of times. So I'll use the example of financial coaching because I've seen this one the most, where somebody's like a financial coach and they're like, oh, so the only podcasts I can go on are the ones about finances. It's like, well, no, actually, that's not true. You can be a lot broader than that and come in. And sometimes it's even better because like you're the very first person that person has had on their show to talk about that topic. Where if you go on the finance show, you're the 3,742nd time that they've talked about that. And so it turns out that I think sometimes we filter too tightly and we look at just direct overlap, and really it's a little broader than that. And so yeah, that's why I started guesting and continue to do it to this day. I've done it, now my third piece, I've added a third leg. I'm looking for shows where they might be people that would be interested in reading my book,
Right.
And so, but I'm still looking for the other two things are still the same. And that's the filter that I use. And then from there, I go on shows and try to provide value and be an interesting guest and do all of those things. And sometimes nobody reaches back out to me. And sometimes I get a new listener and sometimes I get a client.
No, and we'll get to the book because that was my second kind of tool or question about building a business. But before that, yeah, I think it's an amazing tool for a number of reasons. First of all, if you don't have your own audience, this is you
Get in front of someone else's.
Exactly. You speak in front of other people, and it might happen that maybe they're interested in you and your services, or maybe they have someone they can refer. I mean, this is just planting these seeds of luck, these seeds that are going to grow. And what I did, following Scott's advice earlier or at the end of last year, I started to be a guest. And then, I Googled my name. And the first 5 search results were where I was a guest on the podcast. Now, there were not that many listeners to each episode, but it's kind of, it increases your presence on the internet very quickly and with the least effort compared to creating your own content. Here, you just need to show up. You need to have good internet connection and just answer questions. That's it. That's it. So I think it's amazing.
It's relatively both long, what they call long tail, meaning it stays around for a long time. So yeah, absolutely. That first download may have been 10, but like I've got over 1,500 episodes. If you go back to my first couple of episodes, they've got thousands of downloads. They did not get 1,000 downloads when I released it. It was like 3. But now they've got thousands because they've been out there for a long time. Now, granted, when I release an episode, it does get over 1,000 downloads that first 30 days and that kind of thing. But the first few, absolutely not. And yet, even today, they've got many, many thousands of downloads because they've been around for a long time. So that long tail factor is also really valuable. And then, the other piece, because I've seen people do this. Oh, well, this podcast only gets, 50 downloads. Okay, hold on a minute. If somebody came and said you could do a workshop in front of 50 people, or you can talk and you do it in a heartbeat. And yet sometimes people are like, well, that's a podcast. It only gets 50 downloads. It's like, you know
Yeah.
what? Sometimes that's just as valuable. Don't sell it short if it's the right 50 people.
100%, 100%. This long tail, I think, is very important. I've heard the term. There's a turtle content and the hare content. So basically, anything you post on social media, like Instagram post or like stories or LinkedIn post, it's gone. Like how long does
Up and
that
down.
live? There you go. But podcasts, YouTube videos, like these live, for, I don't want to say forever, but decades, right?
Yeah.
And then the final, again, I know it's, I'm a big advocate for that, but I think people who listen to the podcast, like normally podcasts are considered long form content, right? So it's like 20 minutes, 40 minutes, hour. I mean, there are 3-hour podcasts, right? And people listen to them. So I think the type of people who listen to the podcast are very different type of people who watch TikTok and Instagram
True.
Reels. Now, if you want coaching clients who kind of people who can keep attention, who wants to go deep, I think again, podcast is your place. I hope, give you enough reasons to be at least a guest, again, as a first step, because it's low investment in terms of the time and money and knowing what to do. And at some point, you might consider starting your own show, right?
Yeah.
Now,
Absolutely.
I do wanna talk about your book. Well, first introduce us to your book.
Yeah. So my book is called Inspired Living, and the subtitle is Assembling the Puzzle of Your Call by Mastering Your Time, Your Talents, and Your Treasures. So right back to the theme that we've been doing. And on that, I tell everybody I didn't really write a book. I talked a book. See earlier comment about I started a podcast because I hate to write.
I wanted to go back to that comment saying, hey, you said you didn't like writing.
I wrote about it. I don't. But again, where did the content of the book come from? The podcast. So I had all of these episodes with content, and then I had what I was doing in my coaching business, which also has content. And I did actually work with somebody to take that content with me and let's put it together. And so I hired an expert because I'm not an expert in how to write a book. I did the same thing I tell my clients to do. If you're not an expert at it, go find an expert, go get help. And so, but all of that content came out of the podcast. All of the interviews I did came from people I met through the podcast. All of the person who introduced me to the publisher, the person who wrote the foreword. So again, it was that idea of taking what I'm good at, or at least better at, which is speaking. I'm better at that than writing, and yet massaging that to turn it into a different medium, which in this case was a written book. So I wrote the book in part because it's always been on my bucket list to write a book. And most people will tell you they want to write a book, and yet almost nobody does,
Yes.
And so I'm like, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to find a way to do this. But it's a visibility piece. It's a marketing piece. It helps me, again, back to podcast guesting. It gets me on different shows now because I've got a book, so I can go on shows that are just about people that have published a book, which is a whole different audience, and get in front of those folks and talk about what I do. So it has gotten me some speaking events, so I'm still leveraging it for my business in a different way than the podcast that I do or the podcast guesting that I do. But again, they all kind of connect to each other too, because the podcast led to the book, which helps me be more guesting, which also leads to more people listening. It's all connected too, and kind of works off of each other.
No, 100%. And it might, for, again, new coaches who just starting out, it might not be it might be very far away, but you can always start, You can always start with something small, one sheet PDF, one article, then transforming it into kind of few pages, and then just always keep it in mind. I'm a big advocate of expert books. First of all, it was always on my bucket list as well, but I got mine done. I did write a book more as a call-in, but I think another one is on my list as well, because I think it is, like you say, it's one of these kind of foundational bricks that will help in so many ways that we cannot even imagine how it may help you to present yourself, to get a speaking gig, to get on the podcast, to, directly to get clients. And there are so many ways. The investment is it's a big investment, right? Both money, time, energy, 100%, but you do it once and then eternal.
Well, and the
effect.
additional work that a lot of times people forget is we're back to the marketing conversation, because marketing a book is different than marketing coaching.
It's its own thing. It's its own thing.
I've had to learn, oh, wait, I'm doing this now too, so there is work involved, but even just having the book is helpful. But if you actually want to grow it to be part of your core of your business, there is work that you need to do around it, even after the book is published or after the book is written. But at the same time, it's work that if you're mature in your business, it's work that you can do. And there are pieces of that you can outsource successfully too. So when we were talking about with coaching, it's hard to outsource. Book marketing is actually easier to outsource. So you could do some outsourcing as well if you wanted to, but I would agree with you that you might do an ebook or something like that early in your business, but a full-blown actual book published, on the big things and all of that. I'm not a real big fan of what you see some folks telling you to do, which is, produce a bunch of AI content and throw it on KDP, the Amazon publishing.
No, please don't.
Blah, 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 churn it out there. That's just noise. It doesn't really help people. I mean, if you're going to put the content out, do the work to make the content actually valuable to people, and then put it out, and do it in a way that actually has value to it. That's my opinion.
No, absolutely. I'm with you on that one. And, I love writing. So I have the double pleasure of that. All right. Now, wrapping up, what would be my kind of final question? What would be one piece of advice you would want to get when you were just starting out, when you were doing this transition into coaching, full-time or not? Like, what you didn't know that you know now, and you wished someone would tell you?
Go faster than you went. I looking back on it, again, 2011, 2017, 6 years, I really should have made that transition in about 3 years. For my own mental health, for my own what I was really capable of doing and how quickly I could have ramped up, going back in time, knowing, kind of quote, knowing what I know now, I probably took about twice as long as I should have. Now, I'm not a big fan of quit your job, burn the boats, jump off the cliff and build the plane, build the wings on the way down, kind of, just burn everything and jump. I do think people should be deliberate in how they transition, but some of what held me back was imposter syndrome and thinking I wasn't going to be able to do this, and things that in truth were just mindset things, that again, once I started working with a coach and getting some help on my own side of it, that's what allowed me to make that transition. So I would go back and work with a coach sooner. I would go back and make the transition sooner. I would go quicker.
Oh, perfect, Scott. Thank you so much. How can our listeners, watchers, find you?
So I actually put together a page just for you and your listeners. So if you go over to my website, which is at inspiredstewardship.com, and then just /C, the numeral 2C, It'll take you to a page there. I've got some free resources people can have. It's got information about my book, my podcast, all of those, as well as a way if somebody is interested in jumping on a quick call with me and learning more about what I do and coaching, that's all there. Again, everything on there is free. The only exception is the book that has actually, you have to actually buy the book. But other than that, everything on there is free. And again, you can find that in inspiredstewardship.com/C, the numeral 2C, and you'll find everything right there.
Perfect. Amazing. And learn this, folks. This is a great, in my experience, you're the only one who's doing it that way. And I think it's amazing because, it's helping you to track people coming, where they coming from, and how effective those interactions are. I think
it's
this
back
is
to
brilliant.
know your numbers.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Okay. Scott, again, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. I appreciate being here. Thank you for having me.